and I will be discussing some fineries of theory crafting and lore. We'll go and start with the opening here. There are some elements of the opening that a lot of people have deemed relevant to their theory crafting, noting differences in the way that this is rendered, etc. I don't think that's particularly significant, if I were to be totally honest. I think that the development cycle of this game has been an arduous task. For those of you that don't know, this was originally a project for a third-party company, Connect Play 2, who actually is a great developer and probably did a lot to make the combat system as robust and interesting as it is. It also took 5 years to develop, and it seems like they may have changed directions a few times. So I am of the opinion that we are probably realistically looking at differences in assets based on development. Now, a lot of people have noted that the intro sequence, was particularly here gazing into live stream, does not match the intro of the OG game, but it does in fact match the very final frame, leading some to speculate that this is a sequel of sorts due to the magic of poorly constructed time travel. I see that as a definite possibility, and I'll get into more of that later. I also would like to note that in the Ultimania interview, Nomura answers a question by the interviewer, which is, what does she seem to be afraid of? And Nomura answers dismissively, as is his way, but he does say, maybe it's the whispers. So I do think that that's indicating that already in this timeline we are looking at a potentially different outcome. Not drastically, I don't think. I think that they wouldn't rob us of our favorite story beats and experiences, but that a lot of this will be revised to include influencers from the future. Here we have our iconic intro scene. Beautifully rendered. I remember having goosebumps the first time I played the demo. Now, I didn't take time to set up materia before I started the run, but I know that I have no healing materia equipped because I was doing top secrets runs. There's our boy Charlie Sheen, the most improved character, Barrett, who I think is a absolute testament to the new methods by which we can tell a story here in, well, not new, but we have certainly more options in developing characters when you include voice actors and lifelike renders and
goes there?
You're up.
Barrett's great.
You're coming with us.
Don't think so.
Well, looks like I have lightning and elemental, which is fine. There would probably be more utility to switching to fire or ice in this level, just because of human opponents, which are prevalent, and the occasional guard dog, but both the sweeper and the guard scorpion have a elemental weakness to lightning most of the time. There's one element of the guard scorpion fight that it doesn't, but I think I'm going to try and keep him with as much consistency as possible. Okay, here we go. Oh, and another thing, I will not be using elemental armor, simply because I think that that would be healing, and we don't want to do that. Let me just make sure I have all of our chakras and prayers and healings and revivals all taken away. Okay, so I'm gonna be stopping to point out some Easter eggs and talk about some of my theories as we go through each of these.
Who in the hell? Hands where I can see them.
Have fun.
Freeze!
Go ahead. Let's go.
And although I really like Hard Edge, it's my probably most used weapon, I am going to switch to Buster Sword for purity's sake, but I will switch weapons to weapons more akin to the story. I'm not going to really cater it to their necessary use unless it becomes too difficult, especially with the no healing challenge. First Easter egg I wanted to point out here, excuse me, that's not COVID, I promise, is right here we've got Benora White. This is quality apple juice. Now, some of you may remember from Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, the PSP game, and probably the most expansive part of the compilation outside of the OG game in terms of lore. And Benora is the city that both Genesis and Angeal are raised in, and it has a lot of other significance too. The cavern below Benora, for instance, is where it appears that Minerva is, I don't know, resting or housed. Her statue is there. Also, you will notice that the emerald weapon is hidden down there before it's activated. There is a YouTube channel by a YouTuber named Sleep Easy who makes very expansive lore videos. I strongly recommend
Drop the weapon!
everybody listen to those. Those are
You got
a
this.
fabulous source of lore.
What'd he say? You're coming with us.
Can't get around it. See ya.
Now,
Nothing to it.
back to Benora. We've got Angeal and Genesis, who are both, as it turns out in the game, part of the Genova project. There was Project S, which created Sephiroth, and that was spearheaded by Hojo. And then Professor Hollander spearheaded DG project, which created Genesis, who was a perfectly imperfect soldier. He was a strange development in the Final Fantasy VII compilation. For any of you who don't know, he first appeared in Dirge of Cerberus because Tetsuya Nomura fell in love with the music of the J-pop star Gact, and so he befriended him and capitalized on said friendship and Gact's love of Final Fantasy to actually include him in the game. First it was going to be sort of an Easter egg where he did 2 of the audio tracks, and then later on turned into this weird ordeal that he ended up being a character that showed up at the final credits scene. And there was a something called the G report. Well, by Crisis Core, which was developed shortly thereafter, he was a full-fledged character, and his likeness was still used, although his OVA was no longer Gact, it was somebody else. And I think there was a lot of legal reasons for that and cost reasons, but he ended up being obsessed with this play right here, Loveless, which is actually in Crisis Core you can read all but the last act of Loveless. Genesis quotes it constantly and annoyingly. There is some debate as to whether the final chapter that he devises through the course of the story is in fact the final chapter. Either way, the first 4 acts all read like total and utter garbage, and hopefully it is not the secret key of the Final Fantasy VII universe, because that would be ultimately disappointing. And here we have our very first instance of Stamp. Stamp is a massive plot device, and this is the Beagle Stamp. There are 2 forms of Stamp that appear in this game, and I've gone through this a couple times and counted stamps, and I have found at least 98 occurrences of Beagle Stamp. The other stamp there's only 1 occurrence of, and we will go into that more later.
So what's Soldier Boy's deal? Is he one of us now? He's got balls, this, what was his name again?
Cloud Strife.
Right.
And he isn't a soldier anymore. Still, he's a professional, unlike the rest of us. I'm glad to have him.
This is a one-time gig. When it's done, we're done.
Real joy to work with, though.
Real joy to look at, too.
Here we have some of the great dialogue
Looks are what
between
people notice first.
Guess I'm not on the same
Avalanche.
page.
Avalanche is very well developed here.
I'd say you're not even reading the same book.
Enough. We're done
Now
here.
there's an HQ and,
Give it a rest.
Right, Cloud?
and full-blown cells, like a real terrorist organization.
Come on, nobody do something this crazy just for money. They may not think you're a true believer, but you know what I think?
Not interested.
What?
There's Cloud being his aloof self. And of course Wedge, voiced by the fabulous Matt Jones.
Wedge.
who famously played Badger in Breaking Bad, as well as the least
You
fortunate
better be
uncle
worth the money,
in
Merc.
Brightburn.
Every last gill.
Great show. Sure. Wondering. Looking for a movie. Here we have it, the iconic intro to Midgar, Reactor 1.
Get him, boy! I'll end this. Let's dance, asshole! Let's go.
Hey, Cloud! Elevator's over there! Catch up soon!
One of the nitpicks I do have for Final Fantasy VII Remake is the amount of time you spend walking and doing elevator stuff, but I recognize that those are preferable to a loading screen.
This way. Not so fast. We've got company.
Try to keep up. No more playing. Gotta give it my all.
For those of you that
Not
don't
bad.
know, Avalanche's development started to get more complex in the very first compilation title of note, and that is Before Crisis, which was a mobile phone game for a no longer collapsed, completely collapsed forum and service. And we learn a lot about Avalanche and its inner workings, and the fact that it is in fact a larger terrorist organization than just Barrett, who for all we knew was the leader of all Avalanche in OG, but we learned that he was just a small piece of the pie. And one of the most important things we learn about it is that it is secretly funded by Rufus Shinra. And not seemingly as a good guy, but just as a dude in general. So I did go the wrong way. Sorry, I was busy telling you about Avalanche. But back to it. Shinra was, Rufus was trying to stick to his father, who we don't know the first name of. So I just always assumed that his first name is President. At least I hope it is. Rufus does seem to change his tune a little by the end of
Was never in doubt.
the compilation, but Sleep Easy has a lot of theories about Rufus being maybe related to Aerith, and I don't think he's related to a Fallen directly, but I do think that he's got ancient blood. I think that's why you can see the whispers, and I think that there's this completely inexplicable obsession that President Shinra has with the Promised Land and the Cetra, and I think that comes from a deep love for Rufus's mother, who is only spoken of fondly in all of the compilation and On the Way to the Smile,
Soldiers may attack on
in
command, but I hear
Turk's
they
Side
make
Story,
good guard dogs too.
and
Bet you've seen a few reactors. So how do we get to the bridge above Mako's
and
storage?
it's inferred by the fact that Rufus is
Ain't
the
holding
only
out on me,
child
are you?
that
Stab scared to bite
President
the hand that fed
Shinra
him?
considers
Or is he
legitimate.
a loyal little
He
dog?
is
Have it your way,
the
Mom.
known father
We can do this
of
with you, or we can
at
do
least
this
two
without
other
Different reactor,
bastards.
different layout.
One
Depends
being
when it was built.
Lazard,
Never
a
seen
strange
one like
character
this,
from
but I'll manage.
Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, and Evan, who is from the novel A Turk's Side Story, The Kids Are All Right, which is where we're first introduced to Kyrie and
watching you.
and Leslie, who I'll talk about when we get there.
In 3, 2... Damn, I'm good.
Who's there? Door! Well, wait! It's over!
That's my line.
He's alone! We can take it! Dagger!
We're back.
Then let's move.
He always knows just what to say.
Cut it out!
And
Simmer down, hotshot.
I love the dynamic between Cloud and Barrett. It's a lot more tense.
Well, what are you waiting for?
It's a good thing I know someone who can get us the passcodes. Pity no one else at command will talk to us, but what can you do? Then we're good.
There's the first mention of Command, which
Careful in there.
new edition, Final Fantasy VII Remake,
I got this place covered.
Shinra HQ.
Looks like the elevator's on another floor. Mind pushing that button?
I really feel like you
Security's
could,
only gonna get tighter, so
Hey,
be ready. We
I'm the
can't
one with the
afford any
sword.
more mistakes.
but sure, I'll push this damn button for you.
So, you know Tifa, right? It's not really my business, but are you guys close?
We see first existential trauma surfacing on poor Cloud. There will be spoilers in this discussion, I'm sorry. It's just,
Ignoring me?
it's been 23 years, so I don't know what to tell you.
Tifa and I.
I'm very excited to see Nibelheim. I'm curious if that little bit of dialogue is something that actually happened or something that's misremembered, because it does characterize Tifa a little differently. The "you're ignoring me" thing is a little bit more desperate than she was at that period. There's President Shinra.
These sewer rats appear to call themselves
Wearing purple.
Adorants, sir.
Sleep Easy.
We are currently
I think
investigating
is probably the
whether
first
they
person
belong
to
to the same group
recognize
that made
the
the attempt on your
extreme
life.
amount of purple
Rest
that
assured, our
seems to
inquiries
be-
will not take much longer.
represented in the game, specifically centered
This
around
pump's sole purpose is to drain the planet dry.
darkness,
While you sleep,
evil,
while you eat, while you shit, it's here sucking up Mako. It doesn't
conflict.
rest, and it doesn't care. You do realize what Mako is, don't you? Mako is the lifeblood of our world. The planet bleeds green like you and me bleed red. The hell you think's gonna happen when it's all gone, huh? Answer me! You gonna stand there and pretend you can't hear the plant crying out in pain? I know you can!
You really hear that?
Damn straight I do!
Get help.
Say that again!
A little cheese ball, but
I'd worry less about the planet and more about the next 5 seconds. Save the screaming for later.
it gets less cheese ball as it goes on. The localization team did a really good job, especially with Barrett. Like I said, Barrett is
Our lives are on the line now.
a considerably more complex character in Remake,
You
and I think
listening,
that's
Merc?
very important.
One false move. And that happens.
Well, so much for having Cloud do all the fighting. There are some places a sword just can't reach.
Phrasing.
Just bear with him for me, would you?
Yeah.
Should have asked for more money.
Mind me.
Time to get serious.
And then all the characters just play in such interesting and fun ways. There is not a character that isn't fun to play, and it doesn't have multiple playstyles. How cool is that?
Still? Damn it. Hope you don't mind if I take it on.
Buzz off. Let's finish this. Is that it?
Back to Purple. There is a seeming connection
Look what we
between
have here.
Purple
The laser
and
security system. Great.
Genova,
Those things will hurt more than your pride if you're
Sephiroth,
careless. They'll cut you
President
down to size
Shinra,
and then some. But I'm guessing you've done this kind of thing before.
the
Yeah.
Whispers,
Figure out the timing
which
of
I
the
think
lasers.
is
Then make a move when they cycle off.
very important to note.
Exactly. I'll go first. Nothing like a little
Not
danger to get
just
the blood
the
pumping.
purple mass at the center of
Just
the
keep those
Harbinger,
baby blues of yours
but
on me.
there's an enigmatic specter that you fight in both non-boss battle Whispers encounters called Enigmatic Spectre, and in the Japanese version it's pretty noteworthy that he's very purple and that he uses attacks that have been historically used by Sephiroth.
Not too shabby.
Abilities that Safer Sephiroth had, same naming in the Japanese versions. I
Doing good, soldier.
I find that significant. I posted some very long theories about Sephiroth and getting a potential redemption arc, and that there seems to be a added amount of agency that's been added to Genova as a character, and Genova was formerly just a, kind of a force of nature. Shut up. A force of nature that didn't really have any anything active other than that it was a source of power. It was part of the world. It was an opaque sort of.
They don't call those things sweepers for nothing. They can wipe out a whole squad.
I mean, there was allusions to the war between the Cetra and Genova, and
That hunk of junk is a heavy weapons
but
platform.
for all we knew,
We got it. Need to hit
it
it with magic.
was
That should
dead
give us an
by
order.
the time that
Let's put it down. Give it all you've
Professor
got.
Guest found it and started
So we knock it
experimenting
down again.
and
No time to complain.
mistakenly labeled it as an ancient. Now the
What are you, 20-something?
First.
Huh?
Soldier first class. Doesn't go into the 20s.
The hell you talking about? I mean your age, not your goddamn rank. Though for all I know, a soldier's rank could be the same as his age. Mm-hmm. Guess that makes you a 1-year-old, huh?
there are a lot of allusions to Cloud's maturity level, and we don't necessarily see it as much as the player, although we do see some weird things like little white lies, his inability to flirt, stuff like that. And of course, we all know that, he has no idea who he is. His identity is weeks, months old, tops. He just wandered here
That's our
from
target, the reactor core.
from
Gotta set the
Zach's
bomb
last
at the
stand
bottom.
after 5 years of Mako poisoning and Genova infusion.
Let's get down there.
Back to Genova. Genova seems to play a more
God damn.
integral
I can
role
practically taste the
in
Mako in here.
Remake.
Hurry it up.
She, appears in the Shinra building, which she didn't appear until after Junin in the original. And she,
Jack him.
Scared.
More like excited. I've been dreaming about this for years.
in her assessment, has very interesting
Heads up, boys. The end's in sight. I leave the rest in your capable hands.
language describing her ability to actively sow illusion.
Not that way.
This in conjunction with the Ultimania tidbit about Genova, which actively describes that people who are within proximity of Genova will have their conscience influenced. Now, I think that implies a level of agency that wasn't really implied, and I think that we'll see the line blurred
That'll do.
between who the true enemy is in
with that.
Remake. And I'll post a link on my Twitch page. It's on my Twitter and other social media to my theory.
To the planet's core.
No. The pump would suck us back up. All done.
Cocky little bastard, ain't you?
And I don't even know why I'm grabbing these treasure chests. I mean, but I am. It's just habit.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's do this.
Here's our next little existential crisis coming. And this may be further indication coming up
All right.
that
Let's
what we're
see if
looking
little
at
Steph
is,
really can bite the hand that feeds.
is
Go
a
on. Do the honors.
sequel of
Prove to
sorts,
me
and
you're
that's
the man
that
Tifa says you are. That you're one of us.
Never said I was. I'm just here for the paycheck.
sorry, jumped the gun a little.
Then do the damn job.
Now, this flash right here is our first little glimpse of this feather. Now, this feather does not appear
What's
in
wrong?
any portion of the compilation other than Advent Children. That includes Crisis
I'm
Core.
fine.
Now, there
What
are
about the
feathers in Crisis
Your
Core,
call,
but none
Merc.
from Sephiroth, only from Genesis and Angeal.
Pretty
So it
cocky,
could be
ain't
that
you?
they're just modernizing Sephiroth into the one-winged angel, and that this is a homage to the AC, or
You double
this
crossing!
could be just further evidence that what we're dealing with is
Heads up.
What in the hell?
an enlightened Sephiroth from the future. Okay.
No more fun. All right.
Now, for those that don't know, if you've got God or Damarong,
Nothing
I
personal.
definitely suggest always completing the Punisher combo, that downward strike, so that you get Fury, which is a 25% flat bonus to all damage. God, I hate these little cutscenes. That makes them somehow absolutely immune to damage. Or staggering. Literal plot armor.
Damn it. Don't overdo it. I got this. Here it comes. Deal with that. My turn.
And
Taking over.
you always want to use pressure abilities, so things that say focused.
Here it comes. You're mine. Get ready.
And I would have used Infinity Zen there, but it's just time consuming, and you know, he was about to get plot armor. But as you can see, Guard Scorpion is pretty manageable. You just gotta recognize that his elemental weaknesses shift. So when his barrier goes up, be sure to change to fire. Fire, of course, being the second most effective magic at pressuring. Ice being the first, but ice has some other issues.
Try this. Keep it together. I'm waiting. I got this.
And then again. Oops.
I'm waiting. Don't overdo it. Hang back. All right. Gotta give it my all.
And our final bit of plot armor. And here we
Gotta heal up.
Hope you don't mind if I do
There goes another. Now's our chance to do some real damage. Take the lead. Hang back.
and it's all downhill for this poor guy now.
Heal up and regroup.
So needless to say, that wasn't too difficult, but I will say it isn't quite as easy as it looks. You do have to avoid the tail lasers, and you do have to regularly dismantle the EM generator field. I'll go over my material build after this because I think it's salient. I do want to mention that the amount of collateral damage that
You hear that?
Guard
Damn thing
Scorpion
showed you how
does,
it's done.
along with
Come on, we've got to move.
some of the other collateral damage we see, does paint the struggle between Shinra and Avalanche in a little bit different light. We know that Shinra's evil, but Avalanche in particular does its best to actively mitigate civilian casualties. Now, of course, they are willing to weigh the benefits of destroying the Mako, I guess is how it's pronounced. I'm saying it Mako because there's a shark called Mako, and because it's phonetically Mako. But the Avalanche members aren't this bizarre, hard to identify with extremist group, and also, and I hate to be needlessly political, and I don't have an opinion on this, but many people have mentioned that Shinra, you know, the organization, the, you know, corporate government, the particularly Caucasian-looking characters
Do I look okay?
of President Shinra and Rufus are supposed to be analogs of the United States, and
Hey, we'll link up over there.
that
Look after Jesse.
Shinra, being fully aware of
Come this way.
Avalanche's terrorist
This route should lead
activities,
us straight to barracks.
is in fact a you know, false flag operation. And
I think I see an exit.
you know, there's been you know, a lot of rumors that 9/11 was a false flag operation, and that
Don't look back. Let's go.
what
let's
we're
go, let's
witnessing
go.
is Shinra obviously manipulating public appeal, and starting a war with Wutai, by creating real civilian casualty and
Shut up and climb.
exacerbating the damage caused by
Sorry, it just
Avalanche.
It keeps me focused. I'll freak out if I don't talk.
Have it your way.
When I first played OG, I was maybe a little too young to totally understand the ramifications of just needlessly joining a terrorist group and then not really getting
I've got you covered.
a say in
Find us
it.
a way out
But
of here.
But then
I do think that
Don't worry, I'll be fine. I've got
this is
Soldier
certainly an
Boy with
improved take on it, in my humble opinion.
Soldier boy.
They're here! Take them down!
Cool it. 5 seconds is all we need.
Let's go. The others away. Gotta get the hell out of here ASAP.
FYI, if you let this timer run down, nothing happens. Reactor doesn't blow up. You don't get a game over screen. It's not at all like the OG. This is the same for the plate collapse.
Nothing to it.
And again, I'm going to get a treasure chest that's full of an item I probably have 99 of. But I just can't help myself. Sorry, dear listeners.
with that.
Get your ass! I could have done that on my own.
Sure you could.
Cool story, bro. I'm ashamed to admit that I did not know about the Punisher counter until about 3/4 through my first playthrough, but it is absolutely critical to awesome gameplay, and it's one of the things that makes Cloud so cool.
Concentrate.
Is two different and very powerful forms of counter. One that takes ATB and one that doesn't. They have different uses. Counter stance is like a must against like soloing Bahamut, if you're so inclined to do so.
I need a breather.
And I will admit that I just realized that I had
So did you.
the wrong weapon for Barrett this whole time, and that technically it's got the Bloodsucker skill, which is technically healing. Probably not going to replay this chapter because it didn't make too big of a difference, but I will change it now and apologize profusely for the great dishonor that I have brought upon my family. We'll go ahead and do just a Gatling gun. And I realized I probably need to double check that that is in fact not a Bloodsucker weapon. That's a negative Ghost Rider. Some of you may have noticed oh, and I switched out Hard Edge too, which did the same thing. So, glad I did that. Here we see the inside job.
Sir.
Reactor 1 was an inside job. I would like to give a little bit of clarifying context to this. I did this stream almost identically yesterday,
Come on.
but the recording didn't actually have my microphone audio. For some reason, only the Discord users and the followers on the multi-stream were able to hear it. So this is more specifically for recording purposes. I am streaming it live, and so I really appreciate the people that have tuned in twice. You know, if you haven't subscribed, please feel free. But this is to talk about some of the lore points that I talked about. More so in the next chapter. Here I am, helping out Jesse.
If I couldn't, believe me, you'd be the first to know.
And I like that they
I'll
are
take that as a yes.
empowering the females a little bit more in this game. There's always been some pretty strong women from a design standpoint, but some of their characterizations have been a little
Okay,
dainty
that
and
was pretty cool.
princessy.
All right, come on.
I like the more diverse characterization of both women, and I'll say it, black people come a long way in the last 20 years. Japan in particular. In my opinion, America's been backsliding a little bit, but that'll be the only Trump reference I make. The characterization of Barrett was ahead of its time 23 years ago. He is a little bit of a caricature. He is preachy and loud and looked kind of like a ripoff of Mr. T.
Maybe it triggered a reaction with the Mako?
But
the city's still in one piece.
he was a good father,
planet's what matters,
and
right?
not only that, he was a father to a child that wasn't his, and he worked really hard to
This must have helped some.
After all that,
take
it
care
better have.
of
Anyway, let's
Marlene.
get going. We in
And
Sector 8?
he was also the boss of something. He was the leader.
All right then. Lead the way.
And
You got it.
in 2000 and 2001, I lived in Japan, and I can tell you that my experience there was
Watch out for live wires. They're
that
everywhere.
a lot of Western stereotypes, as well as some of their own stereotypes of
The air in here reeks. Can't wait to get out
black
in the
people
open.
were atrocious by today's standards.
Man,
I would
what is
look
that? I've
in
never smelled anything so foul.
tourist magazines for America,
Gotta do something
and
about
because I was stationed in Japan, and I'd get homesick and I read them, and I would be astonished that they would have statistics listed for black crime, not crime, black crime. It also had crime, but there was this fear associated with them. And there's also a Western concept that black people are more likely to be absentee fathers, and I think that OG and Final Fantasy 13 with Saz challenged that notion. In Remake, I'd say that the characterization of Barrett is much better. He's still a little loud and preachy, and at first he was a little over at the top, but as his character develops, you see he's a complicated and intelligent human being. He understands planetology. He probably is the only person that has a functional understanding of what's really going on underneath the surface of the planet, outside of those that have the knowledge innately within them. You know, Red 13 and Aerith.
I felt that one in my guts.
It's also
Just keep
more
on
festively cautious,
We need to get out of this place.
and I think
Was it the Mako density? The
that made a lot more
explosive?
sense.
The blasting agent?
Hey, we can figure that out later.
He should have been a little bit more skeptical
I'm
of
running
Cloud,
empty.
although it doesn't
You can refuel that
quite.
place.
Next time I'll have to bring.
There's a
my
little bit of a
pick-me-up.
hole in why the Whispers needed to get involved in order to get Cloud back in Avalanche later in Chapter 4, but we'll talk about that then.
That's about as good a place as any.
Stand back then. I'll set the bomb.
Can't wait to see you, Marlene.
Can't wait to take a hot shower.
And I see my friend Martin has just joined the stream. Thank you. Hi, Martin. I don't think this will be quite the stream for you. I'm going to talk about some super nerdy stuff about Final Fantasy VII, but appreciate the fandom.
She's good to go. Fire in the hole!
You sure told those doors.
Let that be a lesson to anything that gets in my way.
And of course, every time Biggs comes on the screen, Discord lights up saying Charlie Sheen. And congrats, you're the first person to notice that. Yes, Biggs does resemble Charlie Sheen from the Hot Shots movies, which were like the first very successful parodies, and I'm not suggesting they're good, but they were parody films of Rambo.
No way.
This couldn't have been us, could it?
But what if it was?
What's done is done.
Merc's right. It ain't pretty, but we can't stop now. This was just the first reactor, and the planet won't be safe till we get the rest.
Yeah. We always knew this was gonna get messy.
And this is only the beginning.
Y'all gotta look at the bigger picture here. Nothing worth fighting for was ever won without sacrifice. Though you may not be crying out, I know you're in pain, just like the planet. But it's okay, cause I'm here for you, to help take the load off your shoulders. Your fears.
Alright, simmer down a little.
Your worries. Your concerns. And yes, your feelings. Whatever your problem, I got you.
I am opening chat
what's our next move,
for
boss?
the stream
That's
itself.
easy enough. We get our asses home.
I've just recently started multi-streaming, so... Okay. Alright. Now we're to... Sector 8. And we're going to spend a lot of time looking at pictures of Stamp. And I'm sorry.
We'll split up and shoot for the last train home. Regroup in the freight car. Got it?
Later then.
Hey. I'd like my money now.
You can have it once we're back at base.
Yoo-hoo. I don't need to tell you what this is, right?
Of course not. It's healing materia.
You can have it for saving my life.
Just doing my job. Nothing more.
Yeah. Fact is, I'm lucky you were there.
I do like that Cloud is still...
Survival can be a matter of luck or skill. And you can't rely on luck.
you know, one of our main sources of information about how to fight. But I do miss that he himself was responsible for the tutorial. I thought that was really cool. I understand that it's hard to tell stories like that these days, but
before I forget, here's a little something extra for being so brave. That really was the ride of a
I do
lifetime.
miss that a little
Well,
bit.
See you on the train.
And I love this chapter. I spent way too much time in this chapter. I get into online fights sometimes, and one of the things that people have really had struggled to acknowledge the significance of is Stamp. You know, people have suggested maybe he's a meaningless plot device, or, you know, it doesn't really mean anything, maybe just meant to show that time has passed. And I think it's obviously more significant. I think it's meant to represent that Zack is in an alternate timeline when we see that Terrier reveal. And I'll go into more of that, but I went through and I counted how many stamps are here and looked for a single instance of Beagle Stamp, or of Terrier Stamp, and it's really just one at the end. And there's other more significant details I will go over as we get to the relevant chapters. This game does have some texture problems, I won't lie. But the overall composition of every shot is just beautiful.
Up here! Look up! I said look up! Not that way, right! Careful up here. This could collapse at any moment. If you want up, you'll have to use those stairs.
So what, do we dig our way through? Nah, that's a death wish.
I've looked at every single sign. Clear Icicle, I think, is is probably going to be a brand that comes from Icicle Town, which has a different name in the compilation. They describe the region as Modeoheim, but the actual town is still called Icicle, and I think we'll see that that's where that brand of water comes from, or soft drink, and that the weird manufacturing plant you see in Crisis Core in Modeoheim was quite possibly a soda manufacturing company that Shinra took over. But that's just a fun little Easter egg.
Station's intact.
More Genova flashes from the Mako poisoning as he rectifies his experiences during the Nibelheim incident. Great musical transition right there. Music is just top notch. It's always been top notch in the series, but remake just raises the bar. Here he is. Controversial addition of Sephiroth. While we load walk through the fire at a slow pace.
But then...
I will talk about this particular form of Sephiroth. Now, in Ultimania Guide, Nomura spills the beans that we actually encounter 4 distinct forms of Sephiroth. And this is the first form, and this is the Sephiroth that appears in Cloud's mind. So, but this is distinct from another form that's a form of Sephiroth that is only visible to Cloud. It's the second form. The distinction between those two forms is where Sephiroth comes from, and it does give a chart of where the authors of Ultimania, not specifically the developers, think each Sephiroth appearance lies, and it actually says that this comes from Cloud's mind, that this is all an illusion, which I'm not sure if I totally buy, and I'll explain why at the end.
Wait.
Tyler Hoechlin's voice acting of Sephiroth, I think, is very good. He's a little bit
You're not real.
contentious.
You're
I think people
dead.
really liked Newburn.
I am.
I killed you with my own...
Oh, you need not remind me.
I love it.
It was the crowning moment.
I think it's
of our being
subtle and
together. But
age
that's
appropriate.
then, and this is now. I have a favor to ask. Our beloved planet is dying
Newburn is
slowly,
in his 40s in AC and
painfully.
in his late 40s
Can
in
you
Crisis
bear to
Core.
see the
And
planet
frankly, he sounds
suffer?
older than Sephiroth. Sephiroth is a man in his 20s. People have said that Hokun's voice is too high pitched, which I do not think it is at all. I think it's appropriately
For the
toned.
planet to die.
It's foreboding and
So
subtle,
many things will be lost.
understated but
Hometown
interesting.
that burns so bright. The sound of her voice, pleading for me to spare you. The shiver of her flesh, yielding to cold steel. That which binds us together would be no more, and I would be loath to live in such a world, which is why I must ask.
Now, as I said, if this form of Sephiroth is originating from within Cloud's mind, it would indicate that it is Jenova within Cloud by which he's communicating, which, you know, isn't far-fetched, but there is also this discussion about his obsession with Cloud. It's the first time he says something like this, but he says that if this world is unmade, if this is unmade, I would loathe the world where essentially you don't survive, meaning Cloud. And it is important to note that Sephiroth didn't develop an obsession for Cloud, let alone even a real remembrance or knowledge of Cloud, until he fell into the live stream at the Northern Crater after the events of Crisis, meaning Meteorfall. And this is described in On the Way to a Smile, which was one of the compilation novellas by Nojima that describes Aerith and Sephiroth's journey in the live stream after Meteorfall. And it describes the creation of the remnants, Kadaj, Laz, and Yazoo, which I hate saying out loud. It's the dumbest name. It pretty clearly indicates that Cloud is an anchor by which Sephiroth is able to survive in the live stream. It's the thing that prevents him from being absorbed into it and turning into nothing useful. And it is through his sheer attachment to Cloud that he survives. So if this is through Jenova, and Jenova is being controlled by the Sephiroth body in the Northern Crater, then that would indicate that Jenova is aware of future events, which is possible, but it is distinct from being a time traveler or somebody from the future. And that gets convoluted and muddy, and we'll talk about that more later. But for now, if this comes from Cloud's mind, meaning that this is form number 1, it does mean that Jenova is well aware of future events, including its own fate. And the lines between Sephiroth and Jenova are always blurry, but I think their relationship will get clarified in Remake. And again, look at my page for the link to that theory. Furthermore, the next little bit of dialogue, I think, indicates something more important, which is that This may in fact be Form 2, meaning something that has external agency, and I'll get back to that right now.
This one favor. Don't worry. It's a simple thing. Run, Cloud. Run away. You have to leave. You have to live.
You bastard! Yeah!
Good, Cloud. Very good. Hold on to that hatred.
Now here we can assume that Sephiroth is trying to manipulate Cloud into, following the set of events that makes him able to summon Meteor, etc.
Fumes from all the Mako, maybe.
But who does it actually serve for him to run away?
You got this.
We know that at this point, Sephiroth is still in the Northern Crater, and for his body to receive the black materia, it needs to go the way that it went up to this point. So if he were to run away and not meet Aerith and just have its own thing, who are we serving? And I think that's an interesting question. And I think the most likely explanation is that it is in fact Form 1, which is just Cloud's mind, and that he himself is keyed into future events somehow that we don't fully understand. Now, when Aerith touches him, he does start to see flashes of the future after that, but it's unclear if Aerith was really the source of his ability to do that or not. It's also unclear if it was just her touching him that allowed him to see the whispers in the upcoming scene. But we're going to take a look at the first bit of avalanche graffiti for Stamp, and this particular graphic is used in various states of disarray, just basic palette swaps all throughout the game. But this one is specifically the very first avalanche beagle stamp that we see. This is the same template for the one later pointed out to us directly by Barrett in Chapter 5, Dogged Pursuit.
Oh my! I think that's about to give way too!
I should have taken the side streets.
It's all just a dream!
Well, can't go this way.
Why this one? Nothing. The people who did this are monsters.
There's a lot of really good NPC dialogue that I didn't notice my first playthrough, especially in both slums. Not so much in this, but
Take the alley and climb up to the roof.
I do like to immerse myself in that and see if there's anything I miss.
Many homes are at risk. It is not safe to remain indoors. Please leave your residences at once.
Speaking of Stamp, there have been some interesting parallels made to Beagle as a breed and Terrier as a breed, and that Beagle seems to be more representative in character to Zack, and I guess it's a little bit too vague of a string for me to really bear in mind. I think the source of that is the very first picture we saw of Stamp in Chapter 1, which is blown up on a giant poster coming up. Shows him carrying a smaller dog on top of him. Of course, there's Beaufort. I went through and I took pictures of every single billboard, looking for weird plot points and stuff like that. And I think most of this is probably just meaningless, but it is still cool, the world building.
How do they expect us to evacuate? What didn't collapse? So much for the fast way. This won't face Shinra at all.
And here we are at Loveless Street, and
The fires can't reach us here.
I would fight these guys right now if
Everywhere.
I could.
This won't face Shinra at all.
You see the army
I really hope DLC allows us to watch Loveless one day. I was sort of holding out for the possibility that we might see some DLC Loveless related on June 25th, which has been consistently the release date for Loveless since the OG in '97. But alas, and it's hard to say if that they didn't intend to. It could in fact just be a case of developmental delays from COVID, among other things. Here she is, Aerith, who I think is just tremendously interesting character in Remake. Now, Ultimania also describes this as Form 1, which is all in
You are
Cloud's
too
mind.
weak to save anyone,
And then that's considerably more
not even yourself.
consistent with the way that we're seeing this. Nobody else can see him.
Hey, are you
Seems
okay?
to have the existential Mako flashes.
I'm fine.
Here, this is for you.
Okay, we'll get into it. Yellow Flower. Again, a lot of credit goes to Sleep Easy for this, but and a note on Sleep Easy. His videos are incredible. I do not draw a lot of the same conclusions as he does, but he's incredibly dedicated to the lore, and he makes great videos. And even if you don't draw the same conclusions, you'll learn stuff that, I mean, I've been a lifelong, like, you know, sort of obsessive addict of the compilation, and you know, sort of played all the compilation titles annually since they were released. So I mean, we're talking countless times. And there's things that I learned from watching his videos, and so I strongly recommend that. He's also, you know, ever evolving his ideas, the content that he comes up with. If he posts something that he later changes his mind on, he'll just say that, and I think that's the fun of theory crafting. He's been responsive to several things that I've sent him, and I just think that's a great content creator. So, Yellow Flowers. I think he's the first one to kind of notice the this relationship between yellow and purple, and this duality. Now, Final Fantasy loves duality in every element. Every single game has this light and dark, chaos and cosmos element to it, and it is a Final Fantasy fixture. But after Sakaguchi left at the end of after he stopped producing the games, or after he stopped directing the games, when he started producing the games, the opaque good versus evil kind of struggle became less about good and evil, but just maintain the duality. Like, there is good and bad. It's more of a yin-yang duality, and it's unclear if there's a real good or bad here. We do know that yellow represents Aerith, and probably represents Cloud, and we know that Sephiroth hasn't done a lot of good. Although I will say he was a very nice guy before the Nibelheim incident, like almost warm, like a good friend, and so I did find his existential break to be implausible, to the point that I think that Genova may have had more to do with it than we were led to believe in OG. But yellow seems to represent a certain side of the duality, and purple seems to be the opposing side, and it's all throughout the game. In all the major scenes you can see it highlighted very clearly, and especially in the VR simulation about the Cetra, which is one of the coolest scenes. You see that highlighted constantly, and in the painting. And for all those that don't know, that painting actually has a little short story written about it, called an investigation unit within the painting. There is English translation available, done by a Reddit user, and it's got some very interesting information. It's definitely worth a read. But here we're going to give a flower that seems to symbolize reunion, which is interesting because yellow is supposed to represent the opposite of what we know of reunions, which is Sephiroth and the purple, and it could just be that we don't really know what's going on. We don't really know who's good or bad. We don't know which side anybody's on, and that the fact that it symbolizes reunion should point us to the fact that we're being deceived. Or it could be, and I think this is more likely, that that part of the dualism of this, light versus dark, is that there are themes that are represented on both sides. And I think that there are two types of reunion here. One that's centered in light, love, and one that's centered in cosmos and darkness, and the necessary death cycle of a planet so that new life can be born. And also it's just great fodder for the relentless army of shippers who really think that their chosen bride should marry Cloud. And I don't care at all about shipping, FYI. I think they're all lovely characters, and I'd be happy with any of their chemistry, just as long as Aerith dies.
Huh? A flower?
That's right. It's a gift. For scaring those things away.
What things?
Never mind. Think of it as a memento.
Just my luck.
I heard that,
I'm a sucker for the most optimistic answer, so get used to that.
Well, that depends on the customer. In your case, it's on the house.
Huh?
Lovers used to give these when they were reunited.
A lot of people take that line to say that Aerith is from the future and that they ended up being lovers at some point, and this is her being aware of that. I don't care. Maybe. Probably not. It could mean too that she's aware that he's gonna give it to Tifa, and it's a kind of reunion between them because this is all some cyclical thing and time travel. Or it could be that we're completely overthinking this. Highly likely.
Look, I'm involved in things. dangerous things.
Oh, I'm sure you are. So?
So keep your distance.
Wait, you think someone's out to get you? Is that what you're all worked up about? Relax. No one's going to attack you. I promise.
Hey, a Mako reactor just blew. You shouldn't be out here trying to self...
Help me!
And so I think this is more of an indicator that the Whispers get involved when you do, when you're actively attempting to change fate. And when she grabs his hands, the reason he can see them is because he's now challenging fate. Who's in control of fate? It's a big question.
Are you blind?
You know, you're right.
If you guys don't follow
Nice meeting you.
Brianna White, the VA for Aerith's game stream, her Twitch channel, please do. She's a very nice person, and when I first heard her performance, I thought maybe she was overacting a little bit, or it was a little cheeseball, I thought. But no, she's just like kind of this genuine, innocent person, and that just comes through. And I think she couldn't have cast her better. Okay, so let's go over materia real quick. I'm gonna switch to fire because everybody's got some fire action. There's only a few. As you can see, I have too much materia. But there's only a few guard dogs here, and they're the only ice weak. So everything that we're going to fight in this chapter is weak. But let's go through the rest. Okay, it's a no HP, it's a no healing run. So I have a couple of HP ups. You know, it's just to guarantee survival. It really hasn't become necessary at all yet, but there you go. Now we got two very underrated materia, or just one, but twice, and that's Luck Up. Luck Up increases your critical hit rate by a lot, and you know, I don't go into battle without two of these babies. For somebody, which character I give it to depends on the specifics of the situation. Surprisingly doesn't work that well in Barrett. I thought for sure, because of the amount of hits that would have this sort of, I don't know, extra effect. Steadfast block, I think just for ATB charging. Skill Master, super underrated. You know, especially if you're doing lots of commands and you need the ATP charge filled. Deadly Dodge, it's a fun way to play. It does have a pull effect. It generally has a little bit more fun attached to it if you've got HP Absorb, but you know, no healing rune. And then First Strike, because you need that extra ATB. Then we've got, right now, just because of the stat boost, I have Bahamut as the summon, and because I don't want to accidentally carbuncle and heal.
Hey, you there!
Time to get serious. Let's finish this. Let's go.
And avoid the plaza near the expressway. Train services may
We've
be
got
called without warning. Should this occur, your patron
my
is under
2 millionth.
I repeat. This is an alert from Shinra Emergency Operations Center. The area near the expressway is clear.
I love just looking at the little details in the street.
If you need to access the train station, please take a detour. And avoid the
And we'll
plaza
see
near
another
the
stamp here
expressway.
soon. go back down Loveless Alley. Here's some of that purple. Though I think that one's probably a coincidence. Oh, here's a dog. Must be Stamp. Nope. It's rando nothing.
You are advised to vacate the area immediately. The explosions at the reactor have caused numerous ongoing fires. Many homes are at risk. It is not safe to remain indoors.
Okay.
Now you're in for it. Not bad.
As you can see, even in hard mode, I'm one-shotting a lot of these guys, and you know, a lot of that is just luck up materia, and nothing that's actively lowering my physical attack, and elemental weakness.
All clear. You!
Gotta give it my all. Going in. Was never in doubt.
Avoid the plaza near the expressway. Train services may be suspended without warning. Should this occur, your patience and understanding are requested.
Again, I'm just gonna spare you guys opening treasure chests because, as you may have seen during my menu, I'm at 252 hours. There's nothing I don't have. Okay. What do we have here?
Going all out.
Box him in! Box him in!
Let's dance, asshole. You're mine.
Okay. We got double stamp action right here. And you'll see that little pup that he's carrying on his back.
You are clear to engage. Be advised, target is headed for the
Let's do this. No holding back.
Again, that's my Punisher combo. Comes in a variety of handy.
Ground forces engaging target in Cox Plaza. All nearby units converge and provide immediate support.
And I'll go ahead and limit break these Grenadier. One nitpick I have is why the second Cloud second limit break is called Ascension and not Clim Hazard. It is Clim Hazard in the Japanese version, and it was in the OG. I see that as a meaningless change.
Don't let him get away, no matter what.
So we're gonna look at some posters. You can see more Benara White posters. We've got what I was curious what this is. I think it's interesting. It looks like some kind of bizarre medical checkpoint, which I thought was interesting. What is the point of that in a collapsed sector, or in a sector that isn't, you know, currently under threat? But it looks like it wasn't put up recently. Looks like it had been there. Could just be a restaurant though.
fire! Shoot to kill!
Close call.
Close call. This segment of the game is the one I most frequently go the wrong way on.
Target sighted! Get him!
It's all or nothing now.
I've now done it enough that I know what I'm doing wrong, but I very often would accidentally go back up this and then end up in the plaza again 4 playthroughs in a row, but not this time.
Don't underestimate him.
Time to get serious.
And then we got these little fellers. Deadly dodge comes in a lot of handy for the shield soldiers, especially if you're not trying to use magic. But magic does really just ice these fools.
I see him!
No more playing nice. Here we go. It's over. Enough. Let's go.
And here we see the same stamp poster. They do reuse some assets, I will admit. But notice this. Beagle stamp is on the clear icicle poster too. And then there's a big The Adventures of Stamp Book 3, everyone's favorite series. Now, one of the most common arguments we hear is that the brand's just changed, and that's why we see a Terrier stamp at the end. First of all, it's like 2 weeks ago. I mean, it really, like, the final scene with Zach occurs like somewhere between 2 weeks and like a couple months at the absolute most, between the events of OG and or remake and Zach's Last Stand. So we're really not going back that far. Second of all, let's say it's like an old logo. The fact that there is 98 instances of stamp, all of whom are beagles, and some of them seem to be part of like anthologies, that this is the third part of a trilogy, you know, featuring beagle stamps, seems absolutely asinine. Also, I will just point out that there are some really worn out signs. Chapter 17 has the most, I think, critical occurrence of stamp, but we'll wait till I get there. Here's another worn out stamp right here, one that people miss. This is the Avalanche stamp, and you know, that could have been a couple days ago, but we're talking about, in a matter of weeks, tearing down every poster in Midgar, rebranding the album cover. I mean, it's an absurdness.
Not bad. Time to get serious. Was never in doubt.
Get the bastard!
Going all out.
Holding position!
And then there's always like just this has a tendency to bust up some shields. Now, a really good argument could be made that Fire is more effective in most situations than Firaga. Like, the charge timing on it, it's so much better. Builds pressure, damage per second's higher. It's all expensive MP wise, but we're almost done with the chapter.
Time to get serious. Nothing personal.
And at this point, I'm just saving HP because
Let's go.
it's a beefed up shield guard at the end. Can't remember what his name, the Huntsman, I think, who has the makings of being a character. Can occasionally be a little problematic, and I just want to make sure I make this through. I've put you through enough already.
End of the line, punk. I'm gonna enjoy this.
And if you're enjoying this, please subscribe. I could benefit from more Twitch subscribers than Discord followers or YouTube followers. Not that I won't take it all, but just food for thought.
Gotta give it my all. Let's do this now. All right. Anytime now.
Back off!
Time to burn. No holding, it's over. Enough. Let's dance, asshole. It's on now. Sloppy. Going in.
Move in! Don't let him escape! HQ, this is Sector 8, Unit
Okay.
2. Target is surrounded. Moving to secure.
I love the little reference that's coming up here.
I know that.
Now, we don't know who this is, this soldier, but we know he knows Cloud, and he might be somebody from Crisis Core. I don't know if he's Kunzel. That would be unlikely, given his color, the color of his uniform, but he seems to be somebody that really does know him. And there's a tender and interesting, kind of almost humanizing reach that he makes after Cloud hops here, I wanted to point out. That. I love that. He just, wait, I know you. What's going on? And I think so many of these soldiers were developed as actual, humans in Crisis Core that it
Cloud won't be joining us after all.
does make you feel a little guilty about
I'm sure he's fine.
blowing
You saw
through
him
him
in
like
action, didn't you? Guy's a
yesterday's
soldier.
news.
Goddamn one-man army.
You think he's a keeper?
Guy's a soldier, goddamn one-man army. That's Biggs. Recognizing how Cloud is powerful, Soldier's powerful. I get in arguments about it with actually just one Redditor. There's just one Redditor whom I respect, but he hates the story, and one of the things he hates about Remake is that he thinks they degrade Cloud too much, that they make him seem too pathetic in this, and that in the original he was seen as this unstoppable badass, and when the final reveal happens and we learn out that he was, sort of a accidental fraud.
Ever been attacked by an invisible enemy? What? Wearing robes. Came and went like the wind.
I do think that it's interesting he says wearing robes, and I'll get back to that in a sec. First, I do just want to finish my little strain of thought. The idea that Cloud is very pathetic, and that somehow makes the character development less impactful. I will admit that it seems pretty likely that this particular user doesn't like that certain female characters seem to treat Cloud with a certain level of irreverence, and they don't get the respect. He doesn't get the respect that this person thinks he deserves, which I think speaks more to some deep-seated chauvinism and some, dare I say, toxic masculinity. But I also think he just wasn't playing the same game, because there's a lot of instances that it's really fleshed out how valuable soldier is, how strong soldiers are, and what the difference is between a soldier and a regular bloke. But back to this. So the Whispers, they appear to be cloaked figures, and he even describes them as wearing cloaks. And I just think it's really strange that very few people draw a parallel between the cloaked Whispers and the cloaked clones, the Sephiroth clones that all converged at the Northern Crater in the reunion. And we'll go over that in, I think, deep detail next time, because that is we see our first flash of the robed figures, the clones, including a future flash of them at the Northern Crater, which I think is pretty important, in chapter 3. And we're almost to the end of chapter 2.
We're invisible.
They were, at first. Only saw them after she grabbed me.
A new Shinra weapon, maybe?
More like a panic-induced hallucination.
Never mind. Forget I said anything.
Suit yourself. Come on, let's move up.
A lot of people here.
And in the freight car, too.
Because of the evacuation order, maybe?
Lucky us. We've got a crowd to hide in. Head for the front of the train and hold there.
Due to an explosion at Mako Reactor 1, an emergency schedule is now in effect. Your understanding and cooperation is appreciated.
There's a certain character that we're going to see, and a lot of people notice this, but it is a fun little Easter egg. We obviously I talk to everybody whenever.
Of course they are.
Hey, Cloud.
Excited to see the slimes.
Are you the one
If
who
you're about to
grabbed my
unburden
sleeve?
yourself, don't.
Stop that right now!
Yeesh. You don't make it easy.
Why would anyone do something like that? Do you mind?
Hey,
I'm
got a
trying to
sec?
work here.
And there she is. She was the question mark. This is Kyrie, who,
What the?
um,
That's weird.
Why don't you learn to take a hint?
this is her first appearance in a game, but she is not a new character to the compilation. As I mentioned before, she is a central character in a Turk side story called The Kids Are Alright. And
Why don't you learn to take a hint, buddy?
her, as well as her mother, Mireille, or I'm sorry,
Why don't you learn
grandmother,
to take a hint, buddy?
and she is not secretly Yuffie, which a lot of
Why
people
don't you
thought.
learn to
Got a
take a
sec?
hint, buddy?
You're holding up pretty well, huh? Even after what we saw at the station and all over Sector 8?
Why don't you learn
I'm
to
a
take
soldier.
a hint, buddy?
Wow. My hands are still shaking.
You get used to it.
Something to look forward to.
Why don't you learn to
maybe
take a
not.
hint, buddy?
Do you think boot ties?
She's also apparently very upset with me.
Did Mr. Shinra catch the bad men yet?
Mr. Shinra. So maybe that's his first name. I'll be here all night.
I can't wait to set foot on the surface. Don't be stupid.
Yeah.
Little help, Cloud? Please? I can't stop thinking about it. The bomb I made shouldn't have produced an explosion that big. It doesn't make any sense.
The explosion triggered a reaction with the Mako. You said so yourself.
That was my first guess, but shouldn't a reactor have fail-safes to prevent that kind of thing? You mentioned invisible enemies back there, right?
Right.
No. I'm just looking for excuses for something that was clearly my own fault. Gotta own up to it if I'm gonna learn from this and move on. Thanks, Cloud. You're a good listener.
What kind of maniacs would go so far as to bomb a reactor?
Here's Shinra middle manager, who has a surprising amount of airtime in this game.
Really?
Even got a page dedicated to him in the Ultimania guide.
Is there nothing they won't do?
He is supposed to represent that there's some humanity to Shinra, that, you know,
Everyone knows Avalanche only cares about
not all us
saving the
Americans are
planet.
bad.
Just who do you think you are?
A law-abiding, concerned citizen.
Law-abiding? Really?
Shh. Don't antagonize him.
In my humble opinion, that explosion was a message. A message to the bastards bleeding our planet dry. Think they got it? Heard it loud and clear? Y'all's masters?
We will not submit to intimidation or violence, but work together for peace and prosperity. That is how civilized people change the world.
It's not a terrible
That's right.
point of view, you know. I mean, it's and I think a lot of people can identify with, you know, trying to join a system and
We all have to follow our conscience, don't we?
you know, have a strong sense of justice, and you know, to them, Shinra is an institute of positive change. And here's the truth: it can be. It's owned by a power-hungry narcissist who seems to have this ulterior motive that I think is in fact romantically driven, as I described. We've got Stamp in the Clear Icicle bit there. Just looking. Fun thing, the somebody extracted the asset for this light bulb advertisement, and it was available with better scaling so that you could read it, and it does show that Mako energy is considerably more efficient than the other forms of energy that they end up having to turn to after meteor fall. Barrett finds oil, like the oil that we use, like fossil fuel, and of course, you know, it's sort of a lesser of two evils, and it doesn't seem like they find out what's wrong with fossil fuels and the ozone and all that stuff, but it is a way to keep, you know, people alive.
Let's get this out of the way. Personally, I find visual aids make the dull stuff a lot more bearable. If it helps, think of it as an initiation rite.
How many times do I have to tell you people? I'm not...
There's such a thing as playing too hard to get. So, here we've got a wireframe model of the great city of Midgar, complete with massive steel plates suspended 300 meters above ground level, atop which stands a shining beacon of civilization. The whole system is sustained by the Mako reactors, which feed the insatiable appetites of the public.
The train will be passing through an ID checkpoint shortly.
This here is the train's route. As you can see, it'll take us around this main
I
pillar.
love this scene. This
about halfway
was
through it now.
truly nostalgic.
They've set
The
up
music
a checkpoint
and
here to scan the IDs of all passengers heading in and out. Date of birth,
I don't know why I
residential
dig it so
status,
much. It
criminal
just
history,
it felt
all
very
that and more is automatically
nostalgic
cross-referenced in
for
their
me.
databases. Public security wouldn't have it any other way. Heads up.
And I don't necessarily like all nostalgia.
Our IDs are impeccable. What'd I tell ya? Have a little faith. Won't be long till we reach the bottom. Relax.
Take a good look. It's because of that great big pizza in the sky that people down there gotta struggle to survive. Shinra sucks up Mako while the soil turns to dust, the air fills with smog, and the flowers die.
Then leave and don't look back. That's what's always worked for me.
Well, that's all well and good.
But has it?
If you're only out for yourself. But the folks down there don't have the luxury of choice, you know?
Like this train, I suppose. There's only one way it can go.
This is interesting. I'm glad that that line stayed in there because I think it's an allegory about destiny, and in remake we see destiny challenged to some degree, but to the characters here, this is still feels like they're on a train. So we've got Kyrie, and I'm not sure if you saw Johnny as we first got off. I knew hardly anything about Johnny before remake, but Johnny was all over the compilation. He even opens his own bar in episode Denzel called Johnny's Heaven.
Lower your voices, huh?
And he was in OG, but I just thought he was and he is a minor character, but he
Just be ready for the next
is
mission,
pretty
alright?
consistent throughout the compilation.
See you soon. At 7th Heaven. You know, where Tifa works. Don't keep her waiting. She'll worry.
And here we are at the end of the stream. I really appreciate everybody's patience with me re-recording this, and I do appreciate any feedback you have. Feel free to message me with anything you'd like me to talk about in future installments. I will be continuing the run tomorrow. This time I will be starting here at chapter 3, and I do want to note that behind this train there is another stamp sign, but we can't see it here, and it actually shows up in the Elmira scene, flashback scene, but only if you mess around with resolutions enough to and FOV enough to see it. So I think I'm not super comfortable leaning on that as evidence that Beagle stamp was in play during that scene because of that piece of evidence. But another piece of evidence does make me think that Beagle stamp has been the chosen design since at least 15 years ago, and you'll unfortunately have to wait for me to get to chapter 17 before we see that. Anyways, thanks again, guys, and please subscribe, and I hope to see you tomorrow. I will post on the schedule approximately what time. Thank you.